Ma'ale Adumim, West Bank, September 11th, 2025. In the rugged hills of the occupied West Bank, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu chose one of the most symbolic settings for a momentous announcement. Standing on stage in Ma'ale Adumim, one of the largest and most controversial Israeli settlements, Netanyahu signed off on plans that would dramatically expand the settlement's footprint. And in the process, he made one of his clearest and most uncompromising statements to date regarding Palestinian statehood. With a crowd of party loyalists, settlers and government officials before him, Netanyahu delivered remarks that are already reverberating well beyond Israel's borders. Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister, declared, "Something very big is happening here today because this will double the population of the city of Ma'ale Adumim. Within 5 years, 70,000 people will live here, and that is an enormous change. We will fulfill our promise that there will be no Palestinian state. This place belongs to us." It was a sweeping statement that touched on two of the most sensitive issues in the Middle East conflict, the expansion of Jewish settlements in the West Bank and the outright rejection of an independent Palestinian state. The ceremony, staged with cameras rolling and banners flanking the stage, was meant to send a clear message. For Netanyahu and his supporters, Ma'ale Adumim represents more than just another city in the West Bank. It is viewed as a strategic anchor, a settlement block just east of Jerusalem that Israel has long considered essential for maintaining a permanent presence in the disputed territory. Netanyahu signed the documents authorizing the expansion before delivering his remarks. The atmosphere was celebratory, but it was also charged with the weight of history. Officials applauded and residents cheered as the Prime Minister spoke. The announcement was no small matter. Doubling the city's population from its current 40,000 to 70,000 within 5 years would fundamentally reshape the landscape. To supporters, this was a long-awaited promise fulfilled. To critics, it was a dangerous acceleration of a process that has steadily undermined hopes for a two-state solution. The Prime Minister's words left little room for ambiguity. The commitment he offered was not merely rhetorical, but framed as a binding promise to his political base and to Israel's settler community. He reminded the crowd of what he views as Israel's rightful claim. "Dieser Ort gehört uns," Netanyahu said bluntly, reaffirming a position he has repeated many times but rarely with such stark finality. For Netanyahu, the expansion is both a political and ideological project. Domestically, it shores up support among his right-wing coalition partners and settler groups who have long pushed for further entrenchment in the West Bank. Internationally, it signals that Israel, under his leadership, will not bend to outside pressure, not from the European Union, not from the United Nations, and not even from its closest ally, the United States. Yet beyond the celebratory tone of the ceremony, the announcement drew sharp criticism. According to international law, all Israeli settlements built on occupied land are considered illegal. The United Nations Security Council has passed multiple resolutions declaring settlement activity a violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which prohibits an occupying power from transferring its population into territories it occupies. International human rights groups echoed these concerns. For them, Ma'ale Adumim is not merely a neighborhood or suburb, but a key obstacle to the establishment of a contiguous Palestinian state. Its location east of Jerusalem effectively splits the West Bank and makes the prospect of a geographically viable Palestinian state even harder to imagine. European officials, already frustrated by the collapse of past peace talks, voiced strong condemnation. Diplomats warned that Netanyahu's remarks amounted to an official burial of the two-state solution, long considered the cornerstone of international efforts to resolve the conflict. The Palestinian Authority, meanwhile, issued a swift statement of outrage. Leaders in Ramallah accused Netanyahu of attempting to erase the Palestinian people from their land and warned that the decision would lead to endless confrontation and instability. For decades, the growth of settlements has been one of the most contentious issues dividing Israelis and Palestinians. Since the 1967 Six-Day War, when Israel seized the West Bank, successive governments have encouraged or permitted the construction of Jewish communities across the territory. Ma'ale Adumim, founded in the mid-1970s, has grown into a bustling city with schools, shopping centres and modern housing. Its expansion has always been controversial, but Netanyahu's plan represents a new scale and a new defiance of international consensus. By pledging to double its population, the Prime Minister is not just expanding an existing settlement, he is cementing Israel's claim over one of the most sensitive pieces of land in the entire conflict. The timing of the announcement was also striking. Delivered on September 11, 2025, the speech coincided with a day that much of the world associates with tragedy and remembrance. While global attention was fixed on memorial ceremonies in the United States, Netanyahu used the date to solidify a vision of Israel's future that rejects compromise with the Palestinians. Observers noted that the timing allowed the speech to fly somewhat under the radar internationally, at least initially, but the substance of his remarks ensures that they will remain a point of contention for months, if not years, to come. Inside Israel, Netanyahu's words were welcomed by many on the political right. Leaders of settler organizations hailed the expansion as proof that their decades of lobbying and activism had borne fruit. For them, Ma'ale Adumim is not only a city, but a statement of permanence. Others, however, expressed concern that the Prime Minister's actions risk isolating Israel diplomatically. Centrist and left-wing politicians warned that Netanyahu was pushing the country further away from its democratic allies and locking it into a cycle of conflict with the Palestinians. Some Israelis also worry about the economic costs. Building infrastructure to accommodate an additional 30,000 residents, roads, schools, water systems, will require billions in investment. Critics argue that these resources could be better spent within Israel's recognized borders. For years, diplomats have debated whether the two-state solution remains viable. Netanyahu's words in Ma'ale Adumim may have provided the clearest answer yet. By insisting that there will never be a Palestinian state, and by dramatically expanding settlements, he has undercut the very foundation of the framework that guided negotiations for decades. Palestinian leaders responded by declaring that Israel had effectively declared permanent occupation. They warned that such policies would fuel further unrest and could push younger generations toward radicalization. International analysts echoed these concerns, noting that without a political horizon, the cycle of violence in the West Bank and Gaza is likely to intensify. Netanyahu, already Israel's longest-serving prime minister, is clearly thinking about his legacy. His words in Ma'ale Adumim will likely define how historians remember this chapter of his leadership. Supporters will say he defended Israel's biblical and historical claims to the land. Critics will argue he destroyed any chance of peace with the Palestinians. Either way, the impact of his announcement is undeniable. By placing settlement expansion at the center of his political agenda, Netanyahu has tied his legacy to a policy that is as controversial as it is consequential. As the ceremony concluded, Netanyahu stood on stage, flanked by his ministers and applauded by settlers who saw in him the embodiment of their struggle. The signing ceremony was short, but its meaning was profound. The Prime Minister had made his stance unmistakably clear. There would be no Palestinian state under his watch. For him, Ma'ale Adumim was not just another city, it was a declaration, one that will shape the future of Israel, Palestine and the broader Middle East. And as the crowd dispersed into the hot September afternoon, the words still echoed. We will fulfill our promise that there will be no Palestinian state. This place belongs to us.